Greetings once again. This is Dr. Bill Bailey, and this is VirtZine. VirtZine is the online magazine of virtualization and cloud computing. And I'm glad you could join us for this particular edition of VirtZine. This is a mega big edition of VirtZine. There's just been so much going on in the cloud computing world since our last VirtZine netcast that there's just a lot to share with you. So I want to get right into it in just a moment. First of all, I want to say that we are proud members of the Tech Podcast Network, techpodcast.com. If it's tech, it's right here on the VirtZine netcast. Now, let's get into some of the articles that we have posted in the VirtZine blog. Now, that VirtZine blog is at VirtZine.com, as it says there on the screen. I encourage you to check in, really often on that, because I was talking to a friend of mine that I work with, and he was saying, "Hey, did you hear about this?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I've already blogged about that on VirtZine." He says, I got to read your blog more often because I didn't know about that until just today, and I'd already posted it like a week before. So keep up with what's happening in virtualization and cloud computing by checking out the VirtZine blog. All right, let's look at what's happening here. I'm going to try to run through these quickly because there's a lot of them. On August 5th, I posted that Cloud Computing World magazine debuted, and you can follow a link in the VirtZine blog to that new magazine, Cloud Computing World magazine. The stated goal of the magazine is to stay abreast of the rapidly changing world of cloud computing. Of course, we've been doing that for quite some time here on VirtZine, but this is a full-size magazine with a full staff of people to do that, not just little old me, all right? So check that out. Then I have an article here on who is using Docker and why. Now, you've heard me talk about Docker before. Docker is a technology that allows you to basically encapsulate your application with its own built-in hypervisor so that you can literally take that app and run it without building a separate virtual machine for it to run on. Okay? And primarily Docker is used in a Linux world in terms of hypervisors. So it's gotten more and more popular, and more work has been done on Docker, particularly with an eye towards security for those particularly docked applications, if you will. He goes into the article here. The gentleman who wrote this article is Lloyd Parson from opensource.com, and he reiterates what Docker is. He talks about the many uses for Docker, and then he begins to talk about the security of Docker, and that's what I really wanted to look at here. Remote Interview develops software for recruiters to test the development skills of job candidates. They released CompilBox, a Docker-based sandbox that can run untrusted code and return the output without risking the host which the software is running on. During the development of CompilBox, the team at Remote Interview considered using chroot jails, in other words, change root jails, IDE1, and traditional virtual machines, but Docker was selected as the best option. Okay, and so Docker is getting a lot of uses in that arena, and particularly because of the work that's been done recently on making it more secure. So we're going to hear a lot more about Docker, and in regard to that, the next article is about Flocker. Flocker is storage virtualization for Docker. So if you take a Docker virtual machine application combination, now you can have virtual storage along with your virtual machine, which has your virtual application. All right? See how many layers we're going down here? So storage virtualization for Docker. This is from an article from Enterprise Tech by Timothy Pickett Morgan. He says the Docker application container system developed by platform cloud provider .cloud, now known as Docker software, has been gaining momentum in recent months and is on the way to becoming an alternative virtualization method alongside a full-on server virtualization. Docker is far from being complete, however, and some hosting experts who know a thing or two about data management on public and private clouds are applying that expertise to help virtualize the storage that underlies Docker containers. Docker is a means of encapsulating a Linux operating system runtime and an application stack in a software container with specific resources allocated to it. The containers allow for application stacks to be managed as a whole and for multiple application stacks to be run side by side on physical servers, much as you do with a server virtualization hypervisor, such as KVM from Red Hat, Zen from Citrix Systems, ESXi from VMware, and Hyper-V from Microsoft. The important thing about Docker is that it is a much thinner layer of software and therefore imposes much less of a performance penalty to hypervisors. The commercialized version of Docker 1.0 was announced back in June, including the Docker engine. And then this new development of Flocker, Flocker 0.1, so it's not even 1.0 release yet, is not a complete product yet, but it is nonetheless useful for early adopters of Docker technology looking for a storage virtualization layer. So basically think of it as a kind of a virtualized SAN or disk that's underneath the application, the operating system underneath the application. So several layers down. It won't be long before all 7 layers of the computing paradigm is eventually virtualized. But it's amazing to me to think about that storage virtualization for Docker is virtual storage for a virtual docking component for your virtual application. You have to think several layers down. All right, then we got an article here from Incorporated Magazine online by Graham Winfrey, and it's talking about particularly how the cloud will transform businesses, particularly small businesses, by 2020. Okay, so this is a prediction of what we're going to be looking at for cloud computing in terms of small business adoption. He says that these businesses will be using plug-in players for virtual applications and applications such as Zen Payroll, which is one example he uses here. The company automates and handles all payroll taxes, filings, forms that a small business uses. It's one of 6 million small businesses in the U.S. today that require payroll. 40% of the payroll is done by hand. 1/3 of those get fined every year for incorrectly paying their payroll taxes, in other words, because of penalties and so forth. According to Zen Payroll Chief Executive Officer Joshua Reeves, he gave those statistics, and he says by plugging into cloud-based providers such as Zen Payroll, which processes more than 800 million in payroll annually, small businesses will be able to focus on mission-critical areas of their business without having to be concerned about payroll because they'll be using cloud-based payroll applications. Another prediction he makes here is hives. Hives refer to businesses that operate with employees working at different locations and companies that have increasingly flexible staff levels. This used to be called the Hollywood model, in quotes, where you would form up a team, accomplish a task, and then deform. What we're seeing now is that the cloud is enabling this to happen. We're seeing many cases where people are pooling together resources, whether it's co-working space or shared workspace, and now they can share their applications, share their data all in the cloud. So it will help this hive development in small business. Then head-to-headers. This is another prediction he makes. These are small businesses that are competing with major firms for business, a growing trend in the U.S., thanks in part to the cloud, according to the Emergent report. Airbnb is one example, but the same trend is taking place with small financial advisory firms. For example, 2 of the top 10 U.S. merger and acquisition advisory firms by deal volume are kiosk-type investment banks, referring to firms with between 3 to 5 employees, according to King. These are guys that compete with large businesses taking advantage of the capabilities that the cloud provides. In other words, that shared data in the cloud. They're competing with Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and others. And then finally, he predicts that there'll be a movement toward this, which is portfolioists. It's hard to say. They are freelancers that rely on multiple income streams and use the cloud to manage these streams efficiently. Today, 30% of small business owners with less than 20 employees have at least one second job, according to Emergent. We're seeing more and more examples of this across the economy. The lesson for entrepreneurs who don't use cloud computing is simple. In 6 years, 80% of competing businesses are expected to adopt some form of cloud computing. Those that don't risk falling behind. So those are trends that are expected in terms of cloud computing. Now, big news item that just came out very recently. August 21st is when I posted this, and it was actually released on August the 20th. This is by Louis Ching, who is the Chief Product Officer at VMware. He released information that VMware had purchased CloudVolumes. Now, what is CloudVolumes? Well, I am really excited about this. This is application virtualization managed at a container level. Okay? And the best thing I can tell you is, well, let's look at it this way. Imagine that you roll out a bunch of virtual desktops in your VDI infrastructure, all right? And all of those desktops need to have applications on them for your staff to be able to use them and be productive, right? Well, in the past, the way that's been managed is to install all the applications in a gold image. Well, then, that does two things. One is it increases the weight, if you want to call it that, of the gold image. It's no longer lean and thin and quick. Okay, it bogs it down a bit, just like it would on a regular PC that you install a bunch of software on. But then the other thing is, let's say you've got 10 applications installed, and there's only one of them that you need to upgrade. Well, you've got to take that gold image, you've got to upgrade the software, and then you've got to deploy that gold image and spin up all the PCs. Well, at the hospital where I work, that's 800 PCs that have to be spun back up. And that's a lengthy, and I'm talking about several hours, 2 to 3 hours length of time to spin up all those PCs because you made one change. But now imagine that you could leave your base operating system on that gold image, and that's it. That's all you had, very, very thin. But then you deploy the applications, and I'm going to use this term magically, deploy the applications so that they just appear on the desktop. And if there's a change in an application, you do it in the background, and you just pop it out there, and they don't even know it's changed, but they're running the more recent version. Does sound magical, doesn't it? Well, that's what CloudVolumes does. And this technology is remarkable. The key benefits to customers are agility, simplicity, flexibility, and efficiency. All right, and seeing is believing. One of the things this article does, there's several links in here. There's there's 3 videos that are links in this article. You need to go to VirtZine, VirtZine.com, look at this article, and click on these links and watch the videos. That will demonstrate to you what this is about and how it works. And the article ends up here. The VMware person that wrote this, the executive, said that we're moving toward disposable IT. Now that sounds bad for those of us that are in IT, but that's not quite what he means. Let's read what he says here. Our customers want an aggregate reduction in the complexity of managing applications. This is the VMware executive writing here. The overhead of application lifecycle management today is just too costly and slow. Fundamentally, customers are trying to move to a world where they can reduce complexity and cost, not just by simplifying application management infrastructure, but by leveraging real-time application delivery to reduce support cost, making it easy to reset applications to a known good state and deliver rapid change. That's what he's talking about disposable IT. Being able to make these quick changes and being able to do it in such a way that it does not disturb users working with these technologies. It's amazing stuff, I'm telling you. All right, like I said, I'm going to try to push through these quickly. This next article is talking about vMotion in VMware. vMotion, as you know, is the ability to vMotion a virtual machine, a guest server, from one host to another host. You can either instigate that with a click and tell it to migrate, or you can make it part of DRS, where it is managed independently by the system itself and will move a host, or move a guest to a different host if there's a requirement to, like the host is beginning to have issues and it is experiencing problems. It will migrate over to a known good host, okay? So that's what vMotion is all about. Well, in VMware 6, which isn't out yet, hasn't been announced, but it's coming. In VMware 6, vMotion will become even more powerful. You'll be able to vMotion across vCenter servers. Wow. Now, for instance, the hospital where I work, we have a vCenter server that manages the production VMware cluster. Then we have another vCenter server that manages the view cluster. Okay? But I could take a machine and vMotion from one vCenter to another vCenter, from production over to the view cluster. Wow. That's pretty amazing stuff. Because there's no, at this point, there's no direct connection between those two vCenters. Okay? You can also vMotion across virtual switches. I know, it kind of boggles the mind to think about this. You'll be able to vMotion across routed vMotion networks. And you'll be able to do long-distance vMotion. So you can do permanent migrations for data center expansions, acquisitions, and consolidations. For instance, let's say the hospital where I work was acquired by another entity, and we needed to become part of their virtualization effort, okay? Their vCenter. Well, you could vMotion our virtual machines all the way across the WAN to their network. And that'll be available in as a feature in vMotion in vSphere 6. Wow. Pretty amazing technology that's coming out here. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a whole world changer for us in what we're doing with VMware. All right, next article here. Microsoft Azure computing infrastructure has a major outage. They had 5 hours of unexpected, unplanned downtime, and their customers were essentially cut off from the virtual machines that they had running in the cloud in the Azure system. That is pretty serious stuff for a business, that your computers are down, your servers are down for 5 hours, and you basically have nothing you can do about it because it's all part of the Microsoft Azure system. They also had a major outage in February of 2013, and they've had several outages, minor outages, not as big as this 5-hour one, but minor outages, all during the month of August of this year. So, growing pains for Microsoft. They're having some real issues there. All right? And then finally, we have an article here about a new Linux hypervisor. Now, I know some of you are saying, oh man, Dr. Bill, a new Linux hypervisor? We've already got KVM. We've already got Zen Server. We've got all these hypervisors that are essentially based on Linux. Well, yeah, but this is a new one. It's called Jailhouse. Yeah. This one is complementary, though. It's complementary to other hypervisors. It doesn't completely replace, a separate hypervisor. So let's read a little bit of this article that was in InfoWorld. In the world of hypervisors for Linux, a couple of names have come to the fore over time, Zen and KVM. A new hypervisor called Jailhouse, designed for safety-critical and real-time use cases, made its public debut this week. And this article was posted on August 31st. So basically, as I record this today, it was posted. And it was originally announced late last year by Jan Kaczynska, a consultant and software engineer at Siemens Corporate Technology. Jailhouse is a partitioning hypervisor that can run other OSs or applications designed for bare metal. To run it, one boots a conventional Linux system, starts Jailhouse, then partitions the system's resources to different cells that are isolated from the others. Unlike other hypervisors, though, Jailhouse is optimized for simplicity rather than feature richness. In its GitHub notes, it mentioned that. Functions like overcommitment of memory or CPU, for instance, aren't supported. So it's a bare bones hypervisor for bare metal, okay? So I'm sure we'll be hearing more about Jailhouse in coming months and years, but it's just been announced as being available. I'm sure it's very beta. So, you probably don't want to bet the farm on this one, but it'll be something interesting to look at to see what they do with it. So, that's a lot of information that we provided here through the VirtZine Netcast. I trust that some part of this has been informative and interesting for you, and that it'll help you in your job, in your application of virtualization and cloud computing. Join us again next time. Remember, until then, to keep your head in the cloud.